Welcome to the Social Engineer Podcast. This is the Security Awareness Series. I am Chris Hadnaghi, CEO and founder of Social Engineer LLC, the Innocent Lives Foundation, and the Institute for Social Engineering. I've been hosting this podcast since 2009. That makes me sound very, very old. And this particular series is co-hosted by the one and only Ryan McDougall. Ryan, you're sporting a really shaggy beard. I think you need to tell everyone about that because normally you're not. Yeah. So tell us what's going on and tell us who you are.
All right. Well, let's do the intro first. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Social Engineer. I'm also the co-trainer for the master's level class, as well as our Red Team Labs offerings. I've taught multiple classes in multiple locations, public and private. I've been in the information technology industry for almost 26 years, as you can tell by all the gray and the beard. Last 10 years have been focused on adversary simulation and security awareness. So the beard is for an on-site engagement that I'm doing pretty soon. I like to grow all my hair out so I can try to be a different person if I need to be. Shave it all off.
I know people are going to ask because usually you're very well.
Yes.
You're like, what's going on with Ryan?
I am ready to cut all of my hair. Hasn't been this long in a really long time.
So hopefully ready. You won't need to. You'll be successful on the first try.
Yes.
We'll get that story in another podcast.
Yes.
Okay, so if you're looking for anything to do with social engineering, then you know where to go, social-engineer.com. And I'm really excited about a couple of new things that are coming up. We're about to launch our first ever audio course. It's going to be The Art of Elicitation. And it's going to be focused on social engineering, but also use elicitation in any part of your life. It'll be coming out really soon. When you check the website, there'll be some information on that there, and you can see how you can sign up for that course. Dr. Abby Morono and I have been working on that for the last few months, so I'm really excited to have that released. In addition to that class, our whole 2024 training schedule is up there at social-engineer.com. So if you're interested in any of our classes or you want to see what's going on throughout 2024, then definitely go check that out. If you like the topic of social engineering and you enjoy talking about it, then you should definitely join our Slack channel. The link is in the show notes down below. So if you like that, you can join. If you don't see it there, just ping Ryan or I on LinkedIn and we'll get it over to you. It's about 1,500 people in there now every day talking about social engineering. We even have a job board where about 10, I think it's up to 10 people now found different employment because of coming in there and talking to folks who are looking to hire or saying they're looking to change careers. And it's been a really great time with that board. So hop on in if you are interested in talking about social engineering. Remember, it's family friendly and legal. So if you're thinking of anything else involving social engineering, that's not the channel for you. I'm sure there's others out there, but it's not ours. Okay. And also a couple more announcements real quick. I invite everyone here to check out innocentlivesfoundation.org. If you're not familiar with our mission over there, we've been for 6 years now working closely with law enforcement to identify, track, and geolocate people who traffic children and create child abuse material. I'm really proud to say we're up to 500 cases now that we've been able to hand them to law enforcement. And on the 23rd, wait, Ryan, does it come out before the 23rd? Nope. It comes out a couple days before. So in a couple days, when you're listening to this, we're going to run our very first gala out in LA at Burbank. Our guest is even going to be there with us. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. And none other than LeVar Burton is a host of that gala. I'm really looking forward to being out there and kind of celebrating some of the things that we've done over at ILF. And if you're a fan of the music here on the podcast, and it is none other than Clutch, the lead singer of that band, Neil Fallon, actually helped me start ILF. So he's a huge fan. And the whole band's a huge fan of ILF. And as you know, anyone who knows me at all, you know, I'm a massive fan of Clutch because they are the best band on earth, Maryland based. I mean, you can see the everything behind Ryan. You can't see my shrine to Clutch here, but I'm not going to show it to you because then you'll break in and want to steal all my stuff. But anyhow, it's an awesome band. Best way to take them in is live. So check out pro-rock.com. Go see them in a show. Give them some love for all the support they give us. And last but not least, if you have any questions that you'd like answered on this podcast, or if you like what you hear, you can leave your comments or questions in the notes or comment section on YouTube or any of the other methods that you listen to the podcast. And if you do like it, give us a thumbs up or a like. That helps us to keep going and also spread the podcast all over. Okay. Done with all of that. Now let's get to our guests. We're really excited about this. I'm really excited about this because I just recently got involved with this company, and I'm really excited to talk about what they do and have Evan Blair on. He's a general manager for Searchlight Cyber. If you're not familiar with Searchlight Cyber, let me tell you about all the awesome things they do. They bring industry-leading dark web intelligence and security capabilities to commercial and government sectors. Evan is a seasoned international cybersecurity executive, previously held the role of chief revenue officer at HighSide, and he co-founded and led, and we found this out when we were chatting, ZeroFox, which is just so odd because I've used ZeroFox before. And then he's like, oh, I started that company. I'm like, what the heck? Okay. He also ran Accuvant's Global Partner Solutions Division, and he's been featured on Capitol Hill because he works a lot in trying to advance legislation and funding to try to help active duty military and veterans with their cyber protection, as well as advanced cybersecurity expertise with a background in international economics. I don't know how anyone gets a background in international economics, but we're not going to talk about that on the podcast, okay? Evan also helps businesses develop and launch value-based cyber initiatives, addressing both the concerns of the CISO and the CFO, which sounds like something we definitely need to talk about on this podcast. Evan, it is awesome to have you here.
No, thanks, Chris. I'm really excited to be here, and I appreciate the kind words. It's been it's going to be a fun conversation, so I'm looking forward to it.
So tell us about your like starting off your journey. Okay, so like how did you end up at a company that focuses on threat intel on the dark web? Like that doesn't sound like a normal path for anyone.
Yeah. I guess I've been in the cyber threat intelligence, world for over a decade now, and the broader cybersecurity world for almost double that. And as a co-founder of ZeroFox, right, we started on social media security, and there was a lot of social engineering aspects to what we were doing, and some of the risks that we were trying to highlight, and trying to generate a technological solution to automate alerting and remediation for organizations, whether they be government or enterprise organizations, to mitigate some of those risks that really were impacting their business, their brand, but also their people directly as a conduit into their organization. As a listener of your podcast and anybody else here, we certainly know people are the weak link in the security chain, and we were trying to address some of those challenges. Not the most traditional cyber threat intelligence type of technology, but in that broader pantheon of technology that plays into what is now the very evolved market space and very evolved discipline in the cyber arena. Fast forward, we took that company public, and I moved on to new adventures and new opportunities. When I was approached by Searchlight, they were looking. Searchlight was founded back in 2017. It'd been very active for a long time, but primarily in the European markets. It was actually started with a focus on aiding law enforcement to harness intelligence from the dark web to fuel their investigations into a whole host of bad guys, child exploitation cases, cyber criminal cases, and the like. They expanded into kind of the cyber intelligence arena, and were looking to get a foothold in the United States. So they needed somebody here stateside that had experience in all of those aspects with federal and enterprise businesses. So they started talking to me, and I wasn't really interested at first, but the more I learned about the technology and the mission-driven focus of the organization, and the untapped potential to improve the lives of individuals, law enforcement operators, as well as cyber professionals in the commercial space, I realized that this was something unique and special. You don't run across companies that they check really all the boxes. A solid and defensible technology platform, but one that is really applicable across all sorts of domains, and a company and a group of founders and initial members of the organization that are passionate about the mission, passionate about helping society as that kind of that core guiding light. And it gave me an opportunity to jump back into a world that I know super well, just the CTI world, but learn a lot about a space that, quite frankly, we ran into lots of brick walls when trying to really execute an automated intelligence technological approach to dark web at ZeroFox. And here at Searchlight, they had kind of cracked that nut. There was our founder, Dr. Gareth Owenson, he's our CTO now. He's got like 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 PhDs, and he's considered one of the godfathers of security research into kind of darknet and mixednet networks. And the technological foundation of Searchlight came out of his decades of PhD research. Right, as we all know that those in education, they do a lot of research, and along with our CEO and his co-founder Ben Jones, they were able to commercialize that research, and that gave us decades of dark web data. We have more dark web data than the dark web itself, as we've been storing and categorizing and making available through our platform dark web data going all the way back until 2007 in some cases. So well beyond the founding date of the company, and that gave us a really great platform to understand the way that actors operate, regardless of what type of actor we were talking about, and harness that data. As we all know, data is power, right? Data is everything. And having the most data, or the most relevant and accurate historical picture, gave us not just the ability to continue to identify issues as they go forward in time, but almost gives us a way back machine in terms of the dark web that allows us to, again, build out technology that can more accurately identify risk factors in a timely and actionable way than anything that's been out there on the market. And it's simply a factor of, we have more data historically than anybody. And so our models and our ability to identify these issues is just, beyond that. And thank goodness that Dr. Owenson had, stored all this data, owned all this data, and we were able to really kick things off by saving kids and putting tens of thousands of bad guys behind bars with some of our initial partners in the UK and in the EU. And now we're looking to do the same thing here in the US, but also helping organizations kind of keep their people and their data and their environment safe from a massively growing kind of cyber underground economy that is hell bent on taking us all down. And again, when you dig into it too, it's kind of, you see parallels. I mean, it's just a carbon copy with a really evil twist of the world we live in and the economic environment we live in. And so all of that together just presented Searchlight to me as this opportunity that I couldn't pass up. And I hope that something that I've learned along the way in my career gives me the ability to help Searchlight gain access to folks where that need our help. And so my goal is just to be as good of an influencer or grease on the skids as possible here. The technology and the founding team really does the rest.
So the average listener, so let's say this series is going to be a CISO or some C-level in a company that is, we try to focus on how can we help you be more secure. So from all the things you just said, let's say someone sitting here listening to this podcast doesn't really understand, what do I need to know about the dark web? Like, what's important for me to know right now? Because maybe I'm not familiar with, everyone heard about it, but I'm not familiar with why I need to care. So what would you say to something like that?
Yeah, it is a kind of a mysterious space, and I guess by design, Tor or the Onion Router network is the most common and most popular dark web or dark net. And when we talk about, when I say dark web, that's usually what I'm thinking of is Tor. There's a number of others, I2P is another, and there's plenty of offshoots, but the reality is those haven't really gained any steam. The Tor project is, still by and far the largest, kind of darknet, mixednet, anonymized, kind of decentralized internet infrastructure out there. And to kind of really understand the darknet, you got to go all the way back to the foundation of it. It's actually the outpouring of a U.S. Navy and DARPA research project. And the idea was we needed a way to communicate in a confidential and secure means all around the world. And So we built this network that allowed individuals to communicate and interact on the web in an anonymized way. And so the way that the dark web works is that, when you connect in, the initial connection point does not know where you're trying to go. It knows who you are, but it doesn't know where you're going. And it sends you to another intermediary connection point. That connection point, again, now doesn't know who you are. All it knows is where you came from, which was that first entry point, and it knows where you're going next, which is not necessarily your final destination. Then it sends that connection down to the next point. That point, again, doesn't know who you are. But now that point, if it's an exit node, that may know where you're going, but it doesn't know who you are. And so at no point in a user's interaction on the darknet does any system know all of the factors of you, who you are, or where you're going. And that gives us a really high probability of anonymity. You'd have to own the entire chain and every single node or guard in the environment to know who a person was and where they were going, effectively giving us anonymous, the anonymous ability to move around and interact on the darknet, where that doesn't happen in the normal internet today, right? You go from point A to point B, and if you do stop somewhere along the line, they know who you are and where you're going. You've got your ISP, you've got your, if you're on your corporate network, you've got the corporate network security overlords. So you're not anonymous at all when you traffic on the normal internet. Now, what you do on a site is again protected in some ways, but we know where you're going, and somebody knows where you're going. But on the dark web and on Tor, no one knows. And so it's layers and layers and layers of obfuscation and layers and layers and layers of encryption too. So again, there's a whole, you could look at it, there's a whole layer of a multi-layer encryption that each point can't break the prior encryption either. So if they wanted to, they still couldn't, right? And so you're again, layering in security, layering in obfuscation of who you are, where you're going. And that's really great if you're trying to avoid, there's a lot of positive benefits to what the Tor project does, right? If you're in a oppressive regime and you're trying to communicate externally, think countries that control the internet and control what you can see and where you can go on the internet. You can use Tor to access news sites, to access Twitter or X, I guess, and communicate with others. You can get information in and out of environments that you typically wouldn't have been able to do that. And so that anonymity protects you as an individual in an area or a country that has regulations or laws or policies against open, free sharing of information. And so there's a lot of positives. For example, the New York Times has a Tor mirror of their website. And that's so people can get access to news through Tor. That news may not be kind to certain regimes around the world, and we want to make sure that those users have access. So there's a lot of positive benefits to it. But like anything with anything in this world, the bad guys are going to find a way to manipulate it for their own good, and that's what's happened with Tor. Most people think of Tor as a place where people sell drugs, online drugs. They sell counterfeit currency. They sell firearms and weapons, and they would be completely right in thinking that. It's also a place where people traffic in highly awful and illegal content related to children. It's also a place where people traffic in humans, in actual people, and use the anonymity, but the connectivity of Tor to coordinate really bad things in the real world. And again, that's why Searchlight is focused on trying to help the investigators illuminate what's going on and ultimately identify the perpetrators of that. But going back to your question there, Chris, why does a cybersecurity executive or a chief executive or board member of a enterprise organization, care about the dark web, right? They may care emotionally or personally about, some of those challenges that I've just described. And certainly if that's something that they want, ILF is a great foundation to support and make a difference in. But, what does it mean to them? Well, look, cyber threat actors have created this entire underground economy on the dark web. Put the drug marketplaces aside. There are entire ecosystems that have sprung up around compromising organizations, and where threat actors were operating in isolation or in small groups of those that they knew and those that they trusted. Now we have entire online communities that are deemed safe to interact because it's, again, on Tor and it's anonymous with others. And so what we've seen is actually what happened in the Western kind of industrial world as we moved, think Henry Ford and the assembly line. We don't no longer have to deal. We're no longer dealing with a cyber actor that knows how to do all of the steps of the process. We've got almost a democratization of cyber attack now because we've got an open economy. I can buy a piece of malware from a group over here that it specializes in malware development. I can buy access to a corporate network from a group over here that specializes in phishing users and harvesting credentials, validating those credentials, and then turning around and selling them. And so me, as the guy that's trying to steal your data or put a ransomware on your systems, I don't actually have to know how to do anything other than use Bitcoin to pay bad guys for things. And so you've got this underground economy that exists. And it's wild to me when you start looking at some of this content that to Searchlight is really out in the open. Like we harvest this content and we make it available on our platform. And I'm reading this and people saying, hey, I've got verified access to a Citrix environment at a large multinational airline that has this much revenue annually, and I can confirm that this access has PowerShell and sysadmin rights. And then they'll show screenshots of the easy lateral movement opportunities that this account has, and then they'll sell it. And they, those guys aren't actually going to attack you. They're harvesting access. And then, so I buy the access. Great. Now I have access. Well, I don't know what to do with that access. Well, I can go and buy a piece of malware. I can ask for that malware to be customized. I can, go and buy something off the shelf, or I can say, hey, I need something that does X, Y, and Z. Who can I pay to do that? And now I can run my attack. And I could be a very low-level cyber actor. We call them like script kiddies or anything like that. I don't have to be a sophisticated actor to run a sophisticated attack. And I think when you start to look at the dark web, it's not that the dark web is used to attack you. But it's used to plan, coordinate, and almost it telegraphs the attack and the attack vector that the bad guys are going to take on your organization. And so, if you look at the continuing up and to the right trajectory of quantity and impact of cyber breaches, like we're fighting a losing battle. Right? It's whack-a-mole. Right? One pops up, you beat it down, and then you have to fight the next file. Like you're not building a sustainable program of defense. If you have to keep fighting wave after wave after wave, your warfighters are going to get tired. Your cyber defense team is going to get tired. And they're constantly innovating because they're sharing, they're communicating. It's this underground economy that rewards innovation and success, just like our economy rewards innovation and investment in new technologies and strategies. So does theirs. And they think they can operate in complete anonymity. And typically they do. And there's no consequences for these actors either. And so that's another part of the problem, is that when you're just fighting back, when you're not fighting back, when you're just dealing with things that hit your perimeter, that come at you, you're just, again, setting them up to try again. Now, if you look at, what does this again mean to me? Going back to your question again, what if I could harvest and harness the data that exists in these communication, in these forums and in these conversations about who they want to target? What if I can know the second one of these access brokers is what they call themselves, offers up access to an airline that looks similar to mine. And if I'm the CEO or CFO or the CSO of any airline, I want to know if somebody is saying that they have access to potentially me or any of my peers. Now, these guys are smart, right? They're not saying I've got access to American Airlines and here you go, and here's the IP address of the environment. No, because they do still want to hide, and they know that we're out there looking. But if you're harnessing the data in real time, if you're getting timely data and intelligence, you can then get ahead of the bad guys. You can preempt and prevent an attack. And if you kind of look at, there's a number of things in the cyber world. There's the pyramid of pain and all that. But if you can disrupt the cyber adversaries at a point where it's hard for them to understand why their attacks aren't working, and it's hard for them to then change their behavioral patterns and change the way that they're attacking you because they don't have the intelligence, we can start to head off those attacks. I did a study with a firm that had a lot of really interesting breach data over the last 5 years, and they gave it to us blind. And asked us to look backwards at all of the data and intelligence that we collected over the last 5 years. And we put it into this big array of all of the kind of the intelligence data points that would say, maybe there's an issue, maybe there's an issue. And it came down to about 30 to 40% of cyber breaches were telegraphed in our data set over the last 5 years. And so if I would say, what does the dark web matter to a CISO or a chief executive or a board member? What if I told you that by harnessing the power of the dark web with a lens on cyber intelligence, pre-attack intelligence, you could mitigate 30 to 40% of breaches. Now, these were breach events that ultimately led to cyber insurance claims. So these are big breaches. And so I have to imagine that the number is even larger for smaller breaches that are more contained, but they still have a big impact. And then what does it mean to me? Well, you tell me. Like, how much does a big cyber event cost you in lost productivity, in lost revenue, in lost customer relationships and trust, in legal fees, in IR costs and remediation costs? These are why we spend money on security assessments, and that's why we do social engineering campaigns. That's why we test our own security and probe our own security, is to mitigate the damage that an intrusion has on our organization across so many different layers. But I'm not even saying that, hey, I can help you deal with an issue that's occurring. If you use intelligence the right way, specifically dark web intelligence, you can get ahead of it. It's like having a radar system. Really, like if I often liken back to Pearl Harbor as an example. We had a radar system in place. We chose to ignore the signals that were out there because we thought it's possible that they were false positives.
Yeah.
Well, they weren't. And if you have a cyber radar that can tell you when things are happening, whether they are all the time related to you or all the time going to have a major impact, that's not something that you should dismiss, because some of the times that data is 100% targeting you and telegraphing a major issue that you're blind to otherwise. And they know the tools you have. I mean, the same tools that cyber salespeople use to know what technology you have in your environment so that they can position against their competitors. You better believe the bad guys are using that, and they know that you've got Cisco at the edge, you've got Juniper at the core. Like, they know what you have, and they know how to get around it. I mean, we even see people that are talking that we can potentially give insight into 0 days before they're made aware. Right? We see conversations about developing exploits where people are asking, who has talent and skill and time and willingness to do this? I'm willing to pay you in Bitcoin to develop an exploit for this type of system or this type of appliance or this organizational stack. If you know that and you fit into those categories, whether they're talking about you or not, there are targeted attacks, and then there are blanket, kind of mass attacks on anybody that I can catch with my net. Right? It's a spear phishing versus putting a net into the ocean. Well, I don't want to get caught in either of those. I certainly want to know if they're coming after me directly. But if I could get caught up in this phishing net and dragged into it because of the technology I use or the people, the businesses I associate with, I look at everybody's probably familiar with the MoveIt ransomware attack led by the Klopp ransomware group that took down dozens and dozens and dozens of major companies around the world, companies that spend lots of money on cybersecurity. They ended around them. And in fact, we're seeing this more and more on the dark web, where instead of going after your organization directly, they will go after big data providers, big data technology companies like MoveIt that are embedded in a lot of enterprise organizations, and where the data is really what we're trying to protect, right? And so if I go after data technology, your supply chain, your partner ecosystem, and I compromise them, work my way into their organization, well, then I can just walk right into your front door or your back door, your side door, whatever it is, and wreak havoc. And so again, expanding your lens, you don't have the ability to control the security of your partners. You can ask them to put on a TPRM questionnaire that they do these certain things, but you can't really audit it. You can't monitor it and control it. But with intelligence, and again, I say dark web specifically because it's the most actionable type of intelligence that exists in the CTI world or the cyber threat intelligence world today. It's not the only type, and it's, there's plenty of others, like my former company ZeroFox with social media. That's very important for brand and reputation protection. But when you talk about cyber security protection, the dark web gives us this unprecedented access to information on us as well as others. And so what if you could have identified that one of your partners who has access to data in your environment was being targeted, or exploits were being developed, and you could cut off their access or pause their usage until you could conduct further investigation? Every time, is that going to head off a breach that would have happened otherwise? No. But 1 out of 3 times, which is what the data I have shows, that's a pretty darn good success rate for eliminating the breach entirely, whether it's, again, targeted at you, broadly scooping you up based off of some external factor, whether it's the technology you use, the partners you engage with. It's just a very rich data source, and it's also very hard to collect from. And I think that's one of the reasons that we haven't seen it before in the CTI world. Look, cyber threat intelligence has been around for a long time. I remember in the beginning days, it was, all IP based, right? It was just giant lists of bad IPs and bad domains. Really low on that level of pain for a cyber actor. They can quickly move around to different, IP ranges, different domains. But when they operate from the dark web, especially with command and control servers and environments, and the ransomware entry points, they often do it from Tor. And most organizations don't have that visibility. So it's, again, like the United States and their allies spend a lot of money on defense. They spend a lot of money on their military for protection. And they also spend sneakily almost as much money as they do on active warfighting on intelligence operations. And if you think, why is that? Well, because intelligence allows you to operate at a higher level than your adversary. It allows you to avoid a gunfight. It allows you to circumvent something that could be catastrophic, not all the time, but more often than not. And at least I would take 1 out of 1,000. But if it's 1 out of 3, that is a really good place to invest your money. But it's new, right? And so that's the thing, is this is not this hasn't been around for 20 years. And historically, to get good dark web intelligence, you had to have a lot of Chris's and a lot of Ryan's, sitting in these forums, engaging with them, pretending to be a compatriot of the cyber actors. But there's been a shift in the last couple of years. And I'm not the only firm that does this. There's a couple others. I think we do it better. But, again, we have a very specific lens on pre-attack intelligence. Others have, broader kind of, purposes for geopolitical intelligence, things like that. But we've figured out how to collect in mass and in real time or near real time from this very hard to collect place. Every place we collect from requires, constant monitoring and maintenance to make sure that our collections can continue. I'm not going to exactly say how we do it or how we defeat a lot of these anti-crawl, anti-collect, how we defeat. There's a lot of AI. There's a lot of constant innovation on that side, and there's a huge team that's there at a giant board of blinking lights to make sure everything is green all the time, and jumping when things go down and fixing it so that we maintain that high level of visibility and real time access for our clients. Because the name of the game is timeliness, accuracy, and actionability. And if I can give you those three things, then you can do something about it. And if you're a CFO and you need to talk about cost reduction, this is a great cost reduction strategy. If you're a CISO that needs to improve his metrics in terms of network defense, this is a great way to do that in a really big bulk way. And if you're a CEO who's looking to lead from the front on cyber and prioritize the defense of your data, your people, and your organizational reputation, this is, again, another great way to do that without a massive overhead. I would love to sell for as much as some of my endpoint security compatriots do, but intelligence is a very different space. And I don't have to install on a device. I don't have to implement this, a centralized technology stack. I can do it all in a SaaS environment. Right? I can sell a subscription service to data that is enriched by, artificial intelligence that's powered by human intelligence operators that feeds right into your organization. And so it's almost like an easy button to eliminate a third of your breach, potential breach events. So I guess hopefully that answers the question there, Chris, is why should the dark web matter, and what does it really do for a business leader? It solves a lot of problems. And it is not just a risk mitigation, it is an active security defensive strategy.
I want to piggyback real quick on kind of Chris's question about why they should care, but my perspective is very a practical sense, right? So how am I going to take this data and inject it into my defensive programs? Like some of our listeners are going to be like, okay, this is a lot of information that you've given us to think about. So we all have our defensive programs in place. We do our testing, we do our auditing. Where does this component of intelligence actually fit into that model so that we can actively utilize that as part of the overall program?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So it's one that we're working on in order to make intelligence more useful for organizations that are less mature on the cyber maturity scale. Organizations that are incredibly mature have dedicated cyber threat intelligence teams. They have people whose titles are threat intelligence analyst, and they spend their days using data like this to understand the nuances, to try to draw connections and correlations to conversations, to vulnerabilities, to their network, and really trying to look through the blinds of their organization and of the kind of cyber underground to connect dots and then recommend preventative actions. That's kind of costly. There's a lot of human cost there, and there's a huge skills gap in our industry. There's been I feel like we've been talking about it for 15 years, but there's a huge skills gap, right? And so finding those intelligence operators and analysts that can understand how to use this data in a defensive perspective is tough. But what we're focused on is trying to leverage the kind of the renaissance of artificial intelligence, of machine learning. I really hate calling it AI, but I guess these massive. I know. I guess we have to call it AI. These
just say AI and blockchain.
All these generative.
Great,
Yeah. Can we do blockchain security? No.
AI blockchain security.
How we
blockchain security on the dark web.
Chris got $100 million. Yes. I'm ready to invest. Let's go. But no, the reality is there are a lot of benefits here, and like generative AI models allow us to not only understand what we're looking at in a way that doesn't require as many very trained and skilled humans at all times. It does require those very trained, skilled humans to build and train these models and teach the computer what it's looking for. But one of the things we're working on is taking that next step to, okay, what do you do with it? What do you do when you find that intelligence? What's that next step? Because I can't tell you, and it's I mean, you guys see this all the time. I get kind of scared, and I sell to the U.S. federal government as well as to major North American enterprises, whether you're government or private industry. I talk to plenty of organizations that are household names that when they see what I think is clear and present danger, to their organization with intelligence that should lead them directly to know what to do, they go, "What do I do?" and it's like, oh. And there's, and there's not enough, I don't have enough people to task them out to every single client in the world. And so we're trying to, again, create an automated remediation, playbooks, powered by AI, powered by the historical learnings of like, when we see this, we usually see this, and linking different indicators together so we can give you more of what to do. And my goal is to move dark web threat intelligence from this specialization in the upper echelon of enterprise and government agencies to a normal functioning security operations environment, where you don't need to have those TI analysts that have been trained and spent years in this space understanding how these threat actors operate, but that you can get an alert that says, here's what was detected. Here's the confidence level that it is related to you. Here are the remediation pathways, and here are kind of the base steps that you should absolutely take. Here are the recommended mitigation steps, and then here are the advanced monitoring suggestions to identify if this attack that is being telegraphed does actually impact your environment. Now, hopefully, those first two steps have been done, and it won't have the ability to catch. But it is always nice to know when it does happen, and that we could say, we saw the connection come inbound from the darknet on this IP address, just as we expected, because the access broker was selling access to a VPN system at a major oil and gas company based in Houston, Texas, with a revenue of X. That sounds like us. Let's go look at Let's go look at all the IP blocks that our VPN systems sit on. Let's now force a password reset and authorize credentials to all of our partners that have access to these VPN systems, whether they're human login VPNs or they're system-to-system VPN system environments to share data. Let's re-ask for authentication and change our authentication means for all of those different user groups. And then now let's monitor inbound traffic from the darknet across all of those IP ranges. Now we've effectively prevented that access from leading to a compromise. But we've also then implemented monitoring strategies to identify when that attack would have occurred coming inbound, right? In intelligence, there's no certainty. There's a lot of correlation of actions. So, we try to draw those correlations in an automated way and link those to those defensive actions, because our ultimate goal is to be able to give it to a organization with a SOC analyst where they can subscribe to receive automated alerts and they pop up and it says, do this, do this, do this. The more advanced organizations that may have SOAR, hey, maybe this comes in and it's already got the trigger set up for these types of alerts and these types of correlations. This is what happens. These are the automated prioritizations. A very, very low level one, credentials. It's something crazy in terms of I think it's more than half of all breaches last year, according to Verizon, were related to authorized credentials being used by bad guys. Well, how do they get them? They sell them. Somebody harvests them and then they sell them. Well, if I can see a credential that's being sold for your organization, for your domain, whether I know the specific user or the type of user, you can then, a simple remediation action. Let's say Chris's email comes in. We've got Chris's email is being and his access is being sold on the darknet. Okay, automated action. push a password reset requirement and enforce 2FA for this user.
Yeah.
Problem solved, right? Problem solved. And so there's some very simple things we can do. Now, there's very complex and advanced things that we have to do sometimes, but more often than not, there are simple preventative and remediation actions. Another one is vulnerability prioritization. We talk a lot about, we patch Tuesdays, and there's too many vulnerabilities to keep up with, right? Kind of like the low man on the totem pole in the cyber world is the vulnerability management team. And if we can, they've got 10,000 things they have to deal with every day. They can't ever accomplish all of it. But if we can give them some information that says, a vulnerability that is present in your external attack surface is being talked about by an actor group named X over here, and typically that actor group does Y, and they access the network via Z. Well, X plus Y plus Z equals how to stop that attack from potentially occurring, and gives your vulnerability team the ability to prioritize remediation on a specific vulnerability that has a real world possibility of being used in the near term. And so it's all about preempting how they're going to gain access and how they're going to enter our organization with simple blocking and tackling, like simple basics, and nothing is foolproof. I know that a lot of people like to think that, well, we've got MFA, we're fine there. If anybody just remembers a couple of years ago, like the SolarWinds, attack and the bypassing of MFA algorithms, it doesn't happen every day, but it happens. And I see a lot of accounts for sale that, well, they'll say they've successfully disabled MFA. Now, how did they do that? I don't know. They don't tell me, but they claim it, and it's usually validated by other actors on the net. So just getting ahead of some of the basics, making that part of your standard security playbook, allows an organization of any size to put this into an identify and respond motion rather than a listen and learn motion, if that makes sense.
So let me ask you a couple of questions in closing. First, if people want to know more about both, if they want to hook up with you, but also Searchlight Cyber, what's the best way to stay in contact?
Yeah, well, look, hey, feel free to find me on LinkedIn. I think I'm, /Evan Blair, so pretty easy. But drop me a note on LinkedIn. Happy to connect. Whether you're just interested in learning more, whether you're interested in digging into how this might have an impact on your organization, there's also a lot of great resources on slcyber.io, which is our website. You can also go to searchlightcyber.com. It's longer and harder to type. People like short things. There's tons of good research. In fact, we have a dark web book. So we technically wrote the book on the dark web called The Practitioner's Guide to the Dark Web. And it's really designed as an educational tool for those that are involved in dealing with dark web intelligence, or those that are really trying to get a strong understanding of all of the various things that happen on the dark web. And it's not focused as much on what to do, but it's more educational on hey, what is out there and what are the things we've seen historically, which again, we can draw a lot of parallels from. So that's The Practitioner's Guide to the Dark Web. And it's available on the Searchlight website under the Dark Web Hub link in the resources section. But yeah, drop me a note on LinkedIn. You can find me on Twitter. X, not very active these days, but send me a DM there, and happy to chat. We'll put
links to that in the show notes too. So we always ask these two questions in the end of this podcast. First, most of us haven't got to where we are without a mentor in our life or two. Who would you say would be one of your greatest mentors that helped you get to where you are today?
So you mentioned my background in international economics. I started my career in the financial world, trading in New York City. And, one of my original mentors that led me into the cyber world and into the startup community was a man named John Abraham. He was a guest professor for one class my senior year at Wake Forest. And him and I stayed connected. We both lived in New York after I had graduated. He was a well-connected and very smart individual, and is a poor kid and, trying to make ends meet in New York City. It was nice. He took me out to steak dinners all the time, but he gave me some of the best advice was to prioritize creating value for society, not just making money and lining your own pockets. And really, like, I know I love the financial world, and there's a lot of people in it, but and it serves a really great purpose. But for me, he helped me see the impact that somebody could have on the world. And by doing it didn't mean you had to give up, your dreams of having a comfortable life or, being able to provide for your family. It just meant changing the way that you thought about, how to apply your skills. And so he was a really foundational mentor for me in the early years of my career that drove me into cyber as a place where we could really address a growing issue for society, and the economic value of our companies and our country and the livelihoods of individuals, and safeguarding people from the misuse of technology in order to conduct very bad actions against them or against communities. It really gave me. He helped me understand a sense of purpose in the professional world, and that it's not all about, dollars and cents. There is sometimes a higher calling and a higher good that we can do. And I think a lot of folks forget that and they look at this as just a job, or they look at, their profession as something that doesn't have a higher meaning. And if that's the case, hey, maybe it's time to think about where you can apply your specific talents to make a difference. So he was a great foundational mentor for me, and I would be remiss if I didn't give some props to my co-founder over at ZeroFox, James Foster, who's the CEO there now. I worked with him from a very young age and learned a lot from him, both things to do and things not to do, because again, we all have those things, but working with him for so many years and then founding a company and building that to a global scale, I've always been impressed with his focus on trying to push the ball forward, trying to innovate ahead of data, trying to think beyond where people are today, and see something that doesn't exist yet. It's often obvious when you start, like Uber, for example. It's obvious. Uber's obvious now. Why didn't I come up with that? That's such an easy, an obvious idea. But back then, like the idea that you'd use your phone and some random guy or gal in a Honda Civic or a Toyota Prius would pull up and take you where you wanted to go because of the address you entered into Google Maps. That seems like really weird. Who's going to think that's a good idea before it happens? But again, that's our job as innovators, is to try to understand the problems that our clients and those that we serve are facing, and then think outside the box. No amount of data crunching or sometimes you just have to go with your gut, and you have to believe and trust in yourself. And I guess another thing I took away from him is trust. You've got to trust the people you work with. It's all about people, and so it's really important to find people with that just motor, that drive, that passion that fuels them, rather than prioritizing an educational background or even sometimes experience. But somebody that has, obviously aptitude is important, but somebody that just has that grit. And there's actually a lot of really cool studies on the concept of grit and success. And as a leader, I think it's really important to put a focus on your team and prioritize grit. Those that just have this tenacity, this drive and this passion to run at something and figure it out, and allow them to fail and make their own mistakes, but ultimately, make sure you have that safety net so that they don't fall too far. And you're going to be you'll be running a solid business if you can, innovate ahead of where your clients are, and you can build a team of people with the core identity of grit, to themselves.
Well, thank you, Evan. This was interesting, and I know it's going to be beneficial for a lot of folks. So I really appreciate you coming and spending the time. We have not done an episode on dark web stuff yet, so this will be our first after 227 episodes. So there we go. It's nice to have a first after that many episodes. Yeah. I think that's interesting. And thank you all for joining us this month on the Security Awareness Series. And we look forward to next month when we'll be with another cybersecurity professional. You have to tune in to find out what the topic will be then. Till then, stay safe and we'll see you.